Who do you think should be fifth in the preseason national championship odds for 2025? Well, regardless of who you think it is, the answer is Penn State, according to our friends at FanDuel. That's Zach Sako of Locked On Nittany Lions. Is Penn State being overvalued, undervalued, or appropriately valued there? Goldilocks, is it too hot, too cold, or just right?
I think it's just right from the public perspective, but I'm going to give you the Penn State perspective. I do legitimately believe that Penn State is either the second or the third best team in the country right now, and depending on how things go with the spring transfer portal window, that could change, but they are cemented inside of the top five. I think just because things can change and, teams aren't afraid to throw around money and NIL, so we know this, that we can't predict everything at this very given moment, but they are safely in the top five. And honestly, if the portal window goes well for Penn State or doesn't go exceptionally well for some other teams like Oregon and Ohio State, who are certainly going to have to maximize it, Penn State should be a top three team in terms of championship odds and expectations, or those way too early top 25 rankings. Penn State's a top three team right this second.
I think a big part of that is that Drew Allar's coming back. Nick Singleton's coming back. Kaytron Allen is coming back. Sure, you lose Tyler Warren.
The whole band is back together.
That whole backfield, that took me by surprise, Sako, because I thought at least those are all NFL prospects. Make whatever you want of Drew Allar as an NFL quarterback. He will get drafted at some point in time. But this has to be a tip of the cap to Penn State's NIL collective for putting together packages for these guys to entice them to stay for another year, right? Because now they're kind of doing what Ohio State just did, where they go to these NFL prospects and they say, come back for one more year. We feel like we've got a real chance. Penn State was just in the national semifinal. They were one possession away from being in the national championship game against Ohio State. Is that kind of the mood around this program right now?
Well, it should be anyway. I think it definitely is within the confines of Penn State's football team. For the fans, I think there's cautious optimism, and then, the general public's going to say, well, because I've been starting to beat this drum, is that Penn State is a legitimate national title contender, and they are following a similar trajectory that Michigan did from 22 to 23, and now Ohio State did in 23 to 24. They were so close, but they didn't have enough. But oh wait, let's maximize our NIL. Let's convince the seniors, the veterans, to come back for one more season, run it back, and that's the formula right now. And Penn State was that close. So you see Michigan losing the semifinal to TCU, and then guys that, could have gone off to the NFL, like a Blake Corum, those guys. So that comparable is Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton in that case. So, and Ohio State did the same thing, but then they started to use the transfer portal, right? You go and get a Caleb Downs and a Will Howard to really fill out your roster, and you have a Jeremiah Smith. But Penn State was able to keep everything in-house. You have QB1 back, your co-starters at running back, who were 5th and 6th according to Mel Kiper's ranking. So whatever you think of Mel Kiper, draft analysts at least say that Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen are top 10 running backs, which would get you drafted, in the second, maybe third round? Day 2 NFL draft picks, and they're coming back. Drew Allar was one of the top 3, at least projected to be a top 3 quarterback in this draft, meaning that he probably would have been a first-round pick. He's passing that up. Oh, and don't forget about Denai Dennis-Sutton. Don't forget about players that could have gone on to the NFL, but it makes sense for them to come back and play another year of college. A starting center in Nick Dawkins, another starting defensive end in Smith Vilbert, and then you have those players that are going to take a huge step forward, a Tony Rojas and AJ Harris. So yes, the conversation should be about Penn State being one of the favorites and not on the outside looking in. No, firmly in the conversation for a national championship next season.
When I look at Penn State's schedule and contrast that with their win total, I think it's pretty clear what Vegas is trying to get you to bet on here, or at least our friends at FanDuel. So the Nittany Lions win total, Zach, is 9.5, which I believe is what it was this year as well. They were one of my favorite over bets coming into this season. I thought they would go, I think I had them 11-1, and they ended up going 11-1, of course. So not too shabby there. Maybe I had them at 10-2, but regardless, that's not bad. So they play at Ohio State and they host Oregon. And those are the two big games. And you're looking at that 9.5 win total and saying, are they only losing those games? Are they losing? If they win either one, Penn State will be an easy double-digit win team, and I think right back into the college football playoff. That's how I view Penn State's schedule. What about you?
I mean, if we're kind of going off of odds and what the books are going to be thinking, at this point in time, Penn State would be favored in all of those games. I'm a little more confident in that saying against Oregon than I am Ohio State, given that that is a road game. But Ohio State is losing a lot.
Ohio State is a road game, that is.
Yes. Ohio State is the road. I'm saying Ohio State being on the road. Sorry. Let me start over. For Penn State to host Oregon, I feel confident in that one, being that they would be favored because of Beaver Stadium and everything else. Ohio State being on the road, I'm not as confident. However, Ohio State is losing a lot of players. Will Howard, Travion Henderson, Emeka Ibuka, JT Tuimoloau, guys that should have gone off to the NFL the first time around, decided to come back. Denzel Burke. Okay, so they do get Caleb Downs back, but like I said, unless those kinds of teams like Ohio State and Oregon really maximize the transfer portal and the spring portal window, hey, both those teams are breaking in new quarterbacks. Penn State is going to have a third-year starter, fourth-year player at the quarterback position, which is the most important position in football, and the second year in this Andy Kotelnicki offense. Can't say that about Oregon. Can't say that about Ohio State. Oh, well, Michigan's going to get better. Can't say that about Michigan. Penn State is only in that situation. Texas, because Arch Manning has been sitting and waiting, but he hasn't been a starter. So that's outside of the Big Ten. But within the Big Ten, Penn State's going to be favored in probably at least 11 of those games and maybe even the one against Ohio State on the road.
I don't think they'll be favored in the horseshoe. I do think at home they'll be favored slightly against Oregon. And right now, I'd favor Penn State in that game for the reason you mentioned. I mean, Drew Allar had a great game, did have a couple of interceptions for sure, but made some really big time throws and looked far better against Oregon's defense last year, which is losing a lot, than he did against, say, Ohio State or against Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinal. But speaking of that game, I'll get you out of here on this. The wide receiver room was just not clicking this year. I think you got some talent in the room, but overall, a couple of transfers have been added for Penn State for a reason. And I think that looking back on it, losing Keandre Lambert-Smith might have been the reason Penn State didn't play for a national championship this year. If you have one receiver that Drew Allar can connect with, do they beat Notre Dame? Maybe. I literally think it was that close for the Nittany Lions. I think they would have lost to Ohio State the second time had they gotten there, but better to have the opportunity to lose if you're a fan, of course. But that's to me the aspect of Kotelnicki's offense that didn't get there this season. Do you think they have the talent going into next year to be better in that area?
I'm all alone in this. The wide receivers were bad, and they certainly held Penn State's offense back from being better than what it could have been, but that's not what it was focused on. They didn't rely on the wide receivers. They relied on Tyler Warren. They relied on Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen and Drew Allar to be a competent, capable quarterback. Outside of the Notre Dame game, pretty much did that. He was a clear starter and one of the better ones in all of college football. And it's going to be the same thing again in 2025. Penn State, Spencer, you noticed this as well. Did you see how many games they won without with all of these problems at wide receiver? Whether it's the coach, whether it's the players, and honestly, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg debate. I do think that the talent just has not been there. I actually don't put all the responsibility on the wide receivers coach. I want to put that out there more into the public. But Penn State's wide receiver issues are going to continue because that's not what they're built around. They're going to be built, honestly, they're going to run 3 running back sets next season. They have Singleton and Allen. They're not going to be there to be co-starters. They're going to be part of the starting 11 in that lineup. RB1 and RB2, but not in terms of a depth chart. In terms of, think of a wishbone formation because they have the depth behind them with some of the
shotgun wishbone. I can see it now.
And Andy Kotelnicki is the perfect coordinator to construct this type of offense. They have tight end depth behind Tyler Warren, so even though he's moving on, I like Kyron Hudson. I like Devontae Ross. They give you specialty skill sets. Kyron Hudson can catch anything.
Yes.
Anything that you throw at him. The question is...
Big catch radius.
Exactly. But can he separate? That's the big question. But you can at least at 3rd and 7, look his way. On that 2nd and 1, deep shot, play action type of play, because now you got to respect both Singleton and Allen. Where's the football going inside of the box? Oh, wait, Devontae Ross with that super speed, that flash speed, is going to make you respect the passing game over the top and leave safeties back, which complements Singleton and Allen to give them some more space to work in between the hash marks, in between the tackles, and give them a lot of open green. I like the way that this offense is setting up because Penn State is playing, you're putting the puzzle together. So that number one wide receiver, people are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, is actually not necessary because they have Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, a great offensive line that's come back together. Notice how Michigan won a national title. Oh, but they had Roman Wilson. You can't. Roman Wilson was not a superstar wide receiver. They had Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, J.J. McCarthy, and an elite defense. Penn State can do the exact same thing with an elite defense, Drew Allar, Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, and get enough out of Kyron Hudson. Roman Wilson had a little over 700 yards. Trey Wallace had that this season in 2024. That's all I'm saying. And Penn State had all these wide receiver problems. They are so close. They lost to Notre Dame by 3.